Again, a story that has direct impact with the consumers, and it seems like the week-long IndiGo crisis finally seems to be moving towards a degree of stabilizing. From nearly 1,600 cancellations 5 days ago, today the airline said that there were only 420-odd cancellations through the day. A day after citing minor technical glitches, winter schedule changes, and adverse weather as the factors behind the large-scale disruptions, IndiGo's CEO, Peter Elbers, today put out another video. He announced the stabilization of operations. He was also summoned, by the way, to the ministry, where he was seen giving an explanation to the minister. The pictures have been put out by the minister's Twitter handle. There you go. Those were the pictures put out by the minister's Twitter handle. He's been read out the riot act, is what we are told. But at the end of the day, will heads roll? That is the critical question. A colossal screw-up happened. No one has been held accountable for it. And that is the bottom line. Will the ministry intervene? Will the DGCA intervene to hold people accountable for the time loss, the money loss, the reputation loss, and just the absolute inconvenience that was caused to all of these paying public who paid for their tickets in IndiGo and were shortchanged? I want to play out some reactions and then we'll open this up as well.
Following our earlier communications, today I'm here to share that your airline, IndiGo, is back on its feet and our operations are stable. We've let you down when a major operational disruption happened, and we're sorry for that. We could only fly 700 flights. Thereafter, gradually yet steadily improving to 1,500 on 6th, 1,650 on 7th, 1,800 yesterday, and today more than 1,800. Earlier, we had indicated to normalize between the 10th and the 15th of December. I can confirm now that today, as of December 9th, our operations are fully stabilized.
All right, if you look at the sort of graph of the cancellations over the last week or so, it started off with 550 flight cancellations that happened last Thursday. That's when it sort of really started blowing over. And then on Friday, which was the worst day in the last week, there were 1,600 cancellations. Remember, IndiGo flies about 2,300 flights a day, more than half of which then got cancelled on Friday. So the Friday was the worst day. Progressively from Friday onwards, it has been getting better and better in terms of the flights that they were able to operate and the flights that had to be eventually cancelled. On Saturday, that number got halved from 1,600 to 800. Sunday, Monday and Tuesday, today, which is relatively the best day, there were 422 cancellations. And you heard from the CEO, Peter Elbers, who was also summoned by the ministry earlier on today, that he believes that from tomorrow onwards, which is the 10th of December, all flights will be operated. But there is a critical thing that has happened, and the minister has announced this, that the extra 10% flights that they got because of the winter schedule, and IndiGo runs almost a near monopoly in a large number of these routes, those 10%, that extra 10% has been cut off now from IndiGo. So the centre cracking the whip, but it does seem too little too late. There are financial penalties for non-compliance. They are yet to decide on how much fine IndiGo should pay. That is a critical factor one will have to watch out for. For now, what they have done is a 10% curtailment. Remember, these were extra load, extra routes that IndiGo said that they were willing to fly in the winter schedule. That has now been taken away largely from IndiGo. Whether or not those routes will be given to other airlines, we'll wait and see. The third and most important thing, the action on the top management of the airline, the CEO, the other board members. Again, the government, the ministry, the DGCA has not decided anything on that as of now. The investigation is currently on into the manpower audit, which is currently underway. IndiGo has to report back to the DGCA with a fortnightly review on how they plan to recruit the additional pilots that are required to meet these new FDTL rules. Again, the question is, it's been a week now. Yes, things are stabilizing. Yes, the operations are getting back to a degree of normalcy. But who will be held accountable for what happened over the last week? Now, if the new safety rules by the aviation watchdog DGCA, which really seems to be the trigger point, the flashpoint, then why is it that IndiGo was the only airline that was hit? And that too a month after the rollout. No other airline was hit. Air India was fine, Akasa was fine, other private airlines were fine, but only IndiGo was hit. Number one could be the sheer size of IndiGo operations. They operate more than 2,200 domestic and international flights on a daily basis. That is twice the number of its nearest competitor, which is Air India, which operates about 1,500 flights or so in a day, a little less than that. Now, with such a massive scale, even 10 or 20% of delayed or cancelled flights effectively means that 200 to 400 flights are either cancelled or delayed. And that in itself can be an ordeal for thousands of passengers. On average, if a flight carries anywhere between 180 to 220 or 230 passengers, that means 200, 300 flights being cancelled in a single day can be massive chaos. Another key factor is that IndiGo used to position itself as a low-cost airline but a high operational efficiency airline. High-frequency overnight operations, the airline capitalized on maximizing its flight hours and minimizing its downtime. That is, of course, at odds with the new FDTL rules. So, did IndiGo get away with a mere 10% curtailment as far as the punishment so far is concerned? So far, they've not announced any, penalties on the airline. They've not announced also any heads being rolled after what happened. I want to go across to Captain Saurabh Bhatnagar, former senior pilot with the A320. He was flying for IndiGo earlier. Captain Bhatnagar, everyone is saying these FDTL rules and IndiGo didn't plan properly. They are the biggest airline. Naturally there'll be some disruption, etc. But no one is able to explain why the FDTL rules were in place for one whole month from November 1 and the operations were not affected in a big way. It's only from December 2nd that it's started getting disrupted. Also, no one is still able to explain why all the cancelled flights, all the disrupted flights were domestic flights. In this last 1 week, in the same period where there was massive disruption, all international flights operated by IndiGo were working perfectly fine.
Hi, good evening, Zaka. You brought it very correctly. The actual thing started on the 4th, 5th, and 6th of December. Okay, so now the IndiGo started cancelling the flights from November itself, but in a very, very slow phased manner. It had to happen because there were a couple of reasons for that. They had 2 years to prepare, but they didn't do anything. Poor planning, or maybe arrogant, maybe because of the monopoly, you can say. Okay, then that is why the things started exaggerating and things got piled up, plus increase in their winter schedule by almost 9.6% from the last year's winter schedule. What people are saying 6% increase is from the summer schedule to the winter schedule. But if you look at the last year's winter schedule, they had from last year's winter schedule, the increase is almost by 9.6%. Now for that required almost 20% more pilots, that around 900 to 1,000 pilots to be hired, but they hired only around 400 plus. So all these things added up, and when the new FDTL rules kicked in, basically the night landing for 2 and for the night hours from 12 to 6 p.m. and that the buffer which IndiGo had, and suddenly that buffer collapsed. I'm still not very, I'm not able to, to convince myself that how did it happen, because IndiGo has got excellent softwares, good planning they do. Well, was it, then artificially generated, or it was natural? This is something, something
no,
to
so
be debated.
Net, what has happened is they've got now an extension on the implementation of these FTTL rules. It's been pushed back to February of next year. Maybe that's what IndiGo wanted. Two, they have lost this extra 10% extra routes that they've got from the summer schedule to the winter schedule. Now, I don't know what the government, the DGCA is going to do with these extra routes. Are they going to give it to Air India or other airlines? Are those airlines in a position to service those routes? I don't know. Or will it ultimately come back to IndiGo? Net, it seems like IndiGo has just got a rap on its knuckles. No serious action has been announced so far.
Yes, that is what is quite alarming. The government should have the government has already appointed the high-level committee, and they're supposed to give the report in 15 days. But this is the thing to see whether any punitive action the government will take. The monetary IndiGo is not bothered about monetary action. It's a punitive. Whether some heads will roll, some resignations will happen or not. Initially, they announced only 5% cut. Now they today again announced another 5%. Now this 10% around 230, 230, 40 flights. Will the other airline be able to, manage that? That's one thing, something we have to see. That is why initially I thought 5% was a decent, I would say, a percentage wherein the other flights could, get in Akasa, Air India, SpiceJet. But now with 10%, people will already book their tickets in advance. Whether these flights are going to be, or these routes or these slots, whether these airline can take up, that's another a matter of concern, I would say, because it doesn't happen so easily. They have to
Yeah.
have more aircraft, they have to have more, maybe the pilots, they have to cut short some routes, get the flights cancelled. So it should happen now. These 10% cuts, suddenly the government gives this to the other airlines, and they are also found wanting that they're not able to generate that much. That's another thing which
Also,
we need
these
to see.
routes, we don't know. I mean, maybe they're not profitable,
Now
maybe they're
the
not
rules,
serviceable
yes,
routes. We don't know all of that.
correct,
Okay.
correct.
Okay, Captain, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining us. Captain Saurabh Bhattacharya there used to fly earlier for IndiGo, so he's also just as flabbergasted about how an airline that used to pride itself on operational efficiency, quick turnaround, being able to manage such a large fleet, such a large crew, and such a large number of routes and sectors being serviced, how the entire system seems to have collapsed over the last 4 or 5 days.